Now, the Human Rights Network for Journalists in Uganda, Hrnj, has revealed that journalists have continued to be kidnapped and tortured by security agencies, which as a human rights body condemned, saying that they are to take legal proceedings on journalists who were kidnapped towards the end of last year.
Journalists in Uganda have several times faced torture and kidnapped by security operatives, especially during riots and after producing their broadcasts and publications on the same prominent people. In an exclusive interview with Dream TV, Robert Sempala, the Executive Director, Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, says that several journalists have been kidnapped and tortured by security agencies, being accused for writing a story about the Deputy Speaker of Parliament.
Prevalent crime that is spreading across journalists have been victims. Just last year, over 5 serious cases of torture were recorded, but two stand out, including one of Pidison Kareire of the Drone Media and Moses Mugarura of Bilali Radio. They were kidnapped and held incommunicado for close to 2 weeks. By the time they were produced, they had lots of torture marks on their bodies and they narrated the very ugly stories of their torture.
Human Rights Network for Journalists want to institute legal proceedings for torture in court of law and also request court to drop the charges on the accused journalists.
The matter is in court, so we cannot go into so much details, but on our part, as a media rights organization, we are now going to institute legal proceedings for torture in the courts of law. It's going to be a private suit, but we're also going to move fast and try to impress it upon court to drop the charges because the victims were tortured, and court does not entertain, according to anti-torture law, does not entertain any form of confession or evidence which is obtained out of torture.
Sempala says that in fighting torture, journalists should keep exposing torture cases and advocating for rights of torture victims.
That's the role of the media, to expose and hold to account those that abuse their offices. And so I want to really be very clear on this, that journalists should not shy away from taking center stage in fighting or stamping out torture.
He further reveals that in the year 2022, they want to ensure that they promote more freedom of the press.
Shooting criminal proceedings against those that torture, against those that we think are the sources of torture, is one way that we're embarking on this year to make sure that we hold those accountable, those implicated accountable for those crimes. And we only hope and pray that the courts will be favorable to us.
Moses Magola, Programs Manager, Human Rights Network for Journalists, says that torture in our country should be condemned. He says that torture in Uganda tarnishes the image of our country.
The events of the recent months and perhaps the last 2 years have not been pleasing, particularly the images that are coming through from the various torture chambers.
Magola further states that the security personnel involved in torturing should be brought to book.
To be put a stop to this heinous act and the perpetrators brought to book.
The story was filed